Thank you. That was really amazing. Who knew that he was such a poet, and what great talent and what great talent to have that put to words and to music with those beautiful words and music. Thanks. My name is Karen Red. I'm actually descended through Leonard Harrison Sr. through Keziah Jane Butler. My kids are actually double red, so if you see anybody running around with two ID numbers, they are descended through Leonard Harrison Red Sr. through Sarah Eliza Chamberlain. So that's where we get kind of the multiple red going. But there is the joke for those other Karen Reds that are here. Everyone knows that I am the only true Karen Red. I have the wonderful opportunity to introduce Peter Vidmar today. He graciously accepted my invitation, and when you hear all of his wonderful accomplishments, you'll realize how busy he is and what a great sacrifice he made to be here with us today. So we really appreciate it. He's here by himself. He has his wife and 5 kids are occupied doing other things, so he's kind of a lone man today, but we really appreciate it. He is actually the highest scoring American gymnast in Olympic history. Okay, he finished his successful career at the 1984 Olympic Games. As the captain of the U.S. men's gymnastics team, he led his teammates to America's first team gold medal with their stunning upset victory over the defending world champions, the People's Republic of China. He went on to win the silver medal in the individual all-around competition, the first American to ever have won an Olympic all-around medal. With a perfect scroll 10, he also captured then the gold medal on the pommel horse. He's actually a leader in the Olympics today. He's chairman of the board of the USA Gymnastics, and he has served as the U.S. Olympic Ambassador, co-chairman of the U.S. Olympic Committee Summer Sports Summit, and various workshops for future Olympians. He's worked for many years as a gymnastics commentator for CBS Sports and ESPN, and continues to work as a journalist and broadcaster. He's also served on the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, and various other committees. He was also recently appointed, well, not too recently, by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to serve as the Vice Chair of the California Governor's Council on Physical Fitness. So you can see, we could read his accomplishments all day, but I want to go ahead and turn the time over to Peter Vidmar. Please welcome him with another hand.
Humbled to be here. I do see some familiar faces, many faces that I've only met for the first time, but you're all very good looking. So we come from a good line. I don't know what happened to me, but I'm gonna try to show you something really quickly. I tried. Okay, I have to set this up. So I'm trying to think, so why am I invited here? I know it's not because I've done some terrific family history research. I have not. I do not compose music, and you'll be grateful for that I didn't present anything there. I thought it was wonderful to hear that today. And so I guess it's something that happened about 31 years ago in Los Angeles in 1984, where I grew up. And I'll give you some more of my background after we show this. But for the younger ones in the audience, they might find this interesting or a little bit of fun. I'll tell you, I have to set this video up though. A number of years ago, I was in my attic and I found a VHS videotape, that shows how old I am, in the attic, and I brought it down and it said Olympic Apparatus Finals. And so I told all my kids to sit on the couch. So I brought all the 5 kids down the couch. They were younger back then. They're all out of the house now. But they all sat down. I said, "You guys got to see this." So it's just me from the Olympics. Oh, whatever, Dad. Oh, really? I'll show it to you. So I put the tape in. I push play. First thing they say is, "Oh, Dad, you're so young." So just watch. And what this is this is actually the live broadcast of the pommel horse finals at the 1984 Olympic Games. Going into the finals, I was tied for first place with Li Ning of China. He went up before me and scored a perfect 10. I'm pretty good at math. And so I knew that to tie for the gold medal, I needed to score a perfect 10. That meant that if my toe overlapped the other toe, I'm going to lose the gold medal. If my knee bends in the routine, I'm going to lose the gold medal. If I step on the landing, I'll lose the gold medal. If I inhale when I'm supposed to exhale, I'm going to lose the gold medal. I knew it had to be perfect, at least in the judges' eyes. And so you can imagine that when I began the performance with that in mind, with that knowledge, that I'm going to give it all I've got right from the beginning. Well, for those of you that have ever run track and field, actually, is Jenica Red here? Jenica, are you here? Oh, she's not here. A great runs at BYU. She's my daughter ran track at BYU, and Jenica was her teammate, and I didn't know she was here. She's a very, very good track and field runner. But if you ever run the 400 meters, and if you ever run as hard and fast as you can for the first 300 meters, what's going to happen at the end? You're going to die. Rigor mortis sets in, you tighten up, you can't finish the race, you lose your speed, and so I went out a little bit too hard at the beginning of that pommel horse routine. At the end of every gymnast pommel horse routine, we feel that kind of fatigue, burning sensation in the stomach. Kind of like when you do those last few crunches. And we always feel that, but I started to feel that sensation earlier than normal in the routine. And I had a very difficult dismount sequence that I was kind of known for, that I was planning to perform in that routine. And I thought, oh no, I went out too hard. You're fatiguing too fast. What are you going to do? And I thought, you know, if I play it safe, I could get off that pommel horse with an easier dismount and guarantee an Olympic medal. Guaranteed. But it's not going to be gold. Because the judges are going to know, hey, he watered down his routine, did an easier dismount, you know. We're not going to give him that 10. Maybe we'll give him a 9.9 or something. And there would be a medal, but it wouldn't be gold. Or I can take those chances, go for it, and see what happens. And I remember at that moment, as I'm having this debate in the middle of my routine at the Olympic Games. Now, the debate lasted about a half a second. It's amazing how fast you can process information under stress. But I remember saying, Peter, you do what you train. So I went for it, I did that harder dismount, and landed the dismount successfully. And yet, after all that emotional turmoil I put myself through, I just didn't know if that performance was going to merit that perfect 10. And so I resigned myself to the silver medal at that moment. I thought, you got a silver, Peter, that's good. It's great. Don't be upset. It's okay. It's all good. And then the score flashed, and you'll see my reaction, and that's when all 5 of my kids fell off the couch laughing at me, because in their words, I look so stupid. So I'll show you the video. You'll see my reaction, and I give you permission to laugh at me, and then we'll continue from there. So here we go.
Only man with a chance to tie the name for this gold medal. Peter, the pressure eating a 10 going into that piece of apparatus, the most difficult event in gymnastics. He's got to be clean here, and so far he is very clean. There's the square work. Again, up there against there. Can't hesitate or stop on this event. This is work. So far, so good. Back more down. Reverse shot on the horse up to a near pin on the dismount. He might do it.
Here comes now super slow-mo Peter Vidmar, and during the warm-ups, he seemed so tired. It was like the pre-meet blues. Kind of yawning, tired, couldn't put anything out. Watch this. Great extension. Gets out way away from his hand. Here's his backward travels now up to the pommel, back down in a loop. Spreads his feet, gets set up for some more flare work, and into his dismount. The only thing they may take off for is earlier in his routine when he hung his handstand, maybe a trace too long. Other than that, I saw no deductions. It was really a fabulous exercise.
And he waits for the score. Meantime.
To win the pommel horse is just a tremendous feat in itself.
And Ted Daggett can think we'll get the bronze. Yes. 2 goals. And third place, Ted Daggett. And with the
youngest son of John Red Vidmar, who was briefly introduced as one of the descendants, as a living grandchild of Lemuel Hardison Red. And so my dad couldn't be here today, but he jotted down a little note and says, I want you to bring this note, I want you to read it at the reunion. So I'm fulfilling my dad's wishes here, and I'll share you a little about my dad in just a moment. It says, to the Red family reunion, just a short note explaining my not being with you. My heart and mind will be there, but my 94-year-old body won't, as I cannot take a step and could not fly or stay in the car for the trip. Peter will present and will brief us all upon his return. So he says, love you all, and you can tell how proud my dad is of his heritage. Love you all, John Red Vidmar, underlined, Red. Brother of Gloria Red Hawkins. Brother of Richard Red Vidmar. And then he put father of 6, grandfather of 24, great-grandfather of 40 plus. So I'm still waiting for more of those pluses because my kids are just getting married now. So anyways, and so my father, his mother was Hazel Lorena Red, who was the 14th child, the youngest child of Sir Eloisa Chamberlain. And as you know, they grew up in the colonies. And my grandfather, John Charles Vidmar, was actually an orphan. And he only knew his name. He was raised by a number of families, actually, off and on, in the colonies. And he knew that he's an orphan, he's not a family member, he wasn't going to inherit any land, he wasn't going to get into any farming or agriculture, he had to figure out a way to make a living, and he had a really tough life growing up. And so he was able to find some work in the mining industry, which is where he ended up spending his career, and he ended up with contracts with some of the American mining firms to go work in Chile and in South America. And he would sign a contract where he'd work for 3 years, and then he would come back for 3 months off, and it took a while to get back home from Chile back then. He didn't fly, so and so he was able to get back and spend some time indoors. And he always said this. He says, "I'm going to marry a red girl." And by the time he got back to one of his trips, there was only one left, and it was Hazel. He married Hazel, and my memories of my grandmother, she passed away in 1978. I was in high school at the time. The only other real family member that I knew directly from this line was Effie, my Aunt Effie. And so, because she would come to visit her little sister Hazel every once in a while. And those are my memories of them before Effie and Hazel passed away. And as you know, our ancestors, many of them, they had a hard life in many cases, and they were tough people. And I'd like to think that some of those characteristics came through that helped me to have the experience that I did in my sport as a gymnast. And my father in particular had an influence on me. My dad, by the way, dad will be, I think I said this, but dad will be 94 in September. And my dad actually did gymnastics. In the 1930s, he used to hang out at a place called Muscle Beach, because when John and Hazel settled actually in Long Beach, California, and then in Los Angeles. And although my dad was born in Chuquicamata, Chile, he ended up moving to Los Angeles in the early 1920s, which is where he set up roots and where he's lived ever since. And my dad used to hang out at Muscle Beach. That's where Joe Gold of Gold's Gym got his start. That's where Jack LaLanne got his start. You kids don't know who Jack LaLanne is, but your grandparents do. And Jack's actually a friend of mine. I was at his memorial service just a few years ago, and I remember seeing Jack say, "Jack, you look great." He says, "Oh, Pete, I can't die. It'll wreck my image." He was a great guy. But my dad used to hang out at Muscle Beach down there. He learned gymnastics there, hanging on the bars and swinging on the rings there, and just doing certain skills, learning gymnastics. He was never really an accomplished gymnast. His little brother, Paul Richard Red Vidmar, was a much better gymnast, actually, and actually ended up competing for USC and was the conference champion on the floor exercise. So I had some gymnastics background, but when my father was 29 years old, well before I was born, he woke up one morning. He was actually a salesman. He worked for a pump company in Kansas City. And my dad couldn't swallow. He couldn't figure out why. And he called the doctor and says, "Hey, you know, my throat's tightening up, and I can barely swallow. and I don't know what this is, but I think I need to see you. The doctor, knowing the time, says, John, I think you need to come in now. He says, well, I got a really busy day. And he says, no, you got to come in right now. And so he came in. The doctor took one test on my father and confirmed some bad news. He says, John, I hate to tell you this, but you're coming down with polio. And my dad said, wow, that sounds pretty bad. I'll tell you what, I got a really important meeting at noon, and maybe I can go to that, and then we can deal with this polio thing. And the doctor says, you don't understand, John, this is very serious. He says, you have to be taken to the hospital, and you have to be quarantined. And you can't leave my office, or I'll lose my license to practice medicine. No one knew how polio was transmitted then. They needed to quarantine polio patients. And so my father found himself in a polio ward in Kansas City in a large room with about 40 beds, all with polio victims suffering through polio. Most of them, of course, were children. Mostly children got the disease, and when adults got it, usually they didn't live. And here my dad was, he was 29 years old. And within about 36 hours of not being able to swallow, my dad was completely and totally paralyzed. He said if he had an itch on his face, he had enough movement in his fingers that he could crawl with his fingers up to scratch an itch, and then his arm would fall off to the side and he couldn't move it. And so his muscles would cramp, and then he would yell for the nurses, but since your vocal cords are muscles too, he really didn't have a voice at that time. And all the nurses could do for the polio patients was to literally go from bed to bed with buckets of hot water and towels, and dunk the towels in the hot water and wrap those warm, hot towels around the cramping muscles of the polio victims, and then you just had to wait, either to not make it or to see what damage the disease does. Unfortunately, the disease left his body, but it's also left its damage. And my dad lost the use of about 30+ muscles in his body, all at random. He lost a deltoid in one arm, which means he can't raise this arm. He lost a tricep in the other arm, which means he can't push with the other arm. But where it's most obvious, for those few of you that knew my dad, or that know my dad, he lost all the use of all the muscles in his left leg. He had just a little strand of a quadricep that would contract that would allow him to kind of fling his leg forward and lock it into place. And so my dad's entire left leg is the size of my little wrist here. And so he walked with that very prominent limp for many, many years. My dad now is confined to a wheelchair because he has post-polio syndrome, and so even his good muscles are shutting down. But I'll never forget this. I was about 10 years old one day. My dad came home from work. He worked in downtown LA. His glasses were broken, his face was bloody, and my mother panicked and thought someone beat him up. I said, John, what happened? And he said, I was walking across the street, and my good leg hit a pothole, and I knew my bum leg wasn't going to support me. And I knew I was going down, but I just couldn't get my arms up fast enough, and I just hit the pavement face first, and I broke my glasses, and right in the middle of the street, middle of traffic. People got out of their cars, they had to carry me across the street. I had a homeless guy walk me to the office. And he tells this wonderful story with a smile on his face, and at the end he laughs and says, I gotta be more careful next time. And that was the extent of complaining that I witnessed from my father. That was it. And so he always had a smile on his face. And so I then fell in love with this sport of gymnastics. My dad found this little ad in a local paper about tryouts for a little gym club and said, you want to try it, son? It's a cool sport. And yeah, I'll try it. So, and I fell in love with it instantly. And my coach was an Olympian. And so he knew what kind of path I would need to take if I wanted to be at that level. And so the workouts were hard, and they were challenging, and it was tough. And I remember coming home wanting to complain, but I had to go home to that guy. And he never spoke of the family motto, but the family motto was that Vidmars don't quit. And my dad didn't have to preach it because he just lived it, and we saw it in our home. I do remember phone calls from brothers or sisters, maybe they're having a tough time in college. I can hear my dad in his emotional engineer tone. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds tough. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, you know what the family motto is, do the best you can. I'll talk to you later. But I'm so grateful for my dad and for his example to me. And I don't think that I would have had the success that you saw in that little video without his influence on my life. That influence that I know he gained from watching his mother and his father and the many things that they had to endure and to deal with. And they learned that from those ancestors that we celebrate right now. So I'm grateful to be here. If I could share with you just a couple of things that my mother taught me, that I learned in my sport, is that we all learn in life that sometimes life doesn't go according to plan. You can plan and prepare and train for things, and sometimes it just doesn't turn out the way you hoped. And I never really had to deal with the kind of setbacks and the struggles that my father had or that my ancestors had. But I learned that principle so that in other times that may not be as challenging to you and I, at least I knew how I could and should react to situations. So I was competing once in the World Gymnastics Championships. It was in Budapest, Hungary, about 6 months before the Olympic Games. And going into the horizontal bar finals, that's that single medal bar about 9 feet over the ground. Going into high bar finals, I was in second place. I was ahead of all the Russian and Chinese gymnasts. There was a great gymnast from Japan ahead of me. And what got me into the finals was a very difficult combination of skills. It's hard to describe, but it's a skill where I swing around the high bar and I let go of the bar and I fly straight up over the bar, do a half turn, straddle my legs, come back down, catch the bar, I immediately let go again, do a backflip with a half turn in the pike position, come back down and catch the bar again. Trust me, it's hard. So I made it in the preliminary round of competition and I got a great score. In the warm-up session, before the final round, where I'm supposed to go for the gold medal on the high bar, all of a sudden I can't do this combination of skills successfully. I don't know why, but I start to worry, start to panic. I looked at my coach and I said, hey, you gotta help me. I got 15 minutes until this competition starts and I can't do this skill right. What is wrong here? This is my only big trick. I have to do this. He said, well, let's take a look at it, Peter. So you watch it. Oh, just pike more in the swing. Arch more at the bottom next time. Try that instead. Let go of the bar a little bit later. All these wonderful, valid coaching tips. Till I got the ultimate coaching, teaching, and leadership wisdom. We've all heard it before. But just do it right. And for a while I thought, forget it. I'm not going to do it all at all. I'm going to leave it out. So I won't get the extra points I need, but I can still score a 9.8 with everything else. That's a great score. That should be enough to put me on the victory stand, which was the goal in the first place. But I knew it wasn't enough to put me on top of the victory stand. If I left that skill out, if I scored even as high as a 9.8, I knew in that competition that might be enough for the bronze medal. With a lot of luck, the silver. But realistically, without doing that skill, I'm not going to win the gold medal. And other guys, and I knew that I had a choice to make. I can play it safe, leave out all the risky skills, pretty much guarantee an excellent score, or I can see if I can go for that gold medal. And I looked at my coach and I thought, this could be the only chance I ever have in my life to become a world champion in anything. And I'm going to play it safe and guarantee that I don't become one. I might as well fall off trying. I looked at my coach and I said, I'm going to go for it. So let's do it. So I focused on what I had to do, and the guy who was in first place blew it, made a mistake. All I have to do now is make this performance successfully. I'll become the world horizontal bar champion. Kind of a neat thing. So I chalk up my hands, I signal the superior judge, and that big difficult skill that I described comes right at the beginning. I swing around the bar, I let go of the bar, I flew straight up over the bar, half turn, straddled my legs, came back down, caught the bar. I immediately let go again, did that back flip with a half turn in the pike position, came back down to catch the bar, and the bar wasn't there. I know that you're not gymnasts, but you all know enough about my sport to know this. You're only allowed to do one dismount in each performance. So I dropped about 12 feet on my stomach, hit the mat, got back up, grabbed the bar, finished my routine, landed my real dismount perfectly. Big deal. I jumped off the platform, walked away, I grabbed my bag, I left the arena, and I was devastated. I blew it, I choked under pressure, I failed. On Wide World of Sports to make it worse. I think I placed something like 8th in the world. There were only 8 people in the competition, so I'm walking back from the arena to the hotel. I'm all alone because nobody wanted to talk to me. And about halfway there, I stopped and I promised myself something to basically live from here right down to here. And nobody heard this from me. It wasn't this dramatic sports moment. But I meant it when I said it to myself. I just said, Never again. I am never going to make that mistake again. I got to stop taking that skill for granted. Because I train that skill like everything else I do with gymnastics. Think about all the guys and girls that maybe you saw competing in my sport just 3 years ago in London. Think of those that are getting ready for the next Olympic Games in Rio in 2016. Realize that for the months that precede their experience, their Olympic experience, anytime a gymnast walks into the gym to train, they may have over 150 separate individual skills that comprise the routines you see them performing at the Games. And they got to perfect every one of those skills. Not do them well, they got to perfect every one of those skills. Some of them are easy, some are really hard. And it's easy to say, well, you know what, I don't have time to give extra attention to some little problem just because it needs it. Do I? I had to. So for the next 6 or 7 months leading up to the Olympic Games, almost every day, I go back to that horizontal bar, work a little bit extra on that risky release move that I tried to describe to you. And fortunately for me, that event, the high bar, was one of the events in which I ended up scoring a perfect 10 at the Olympic Games. So looking back, it's a lot easier looking back. I can say, well, gee, I'm so glad I failed. I am. It wasn't fun when it happened. I hated the experience, but I'm glad it happened because it taught me to really focus in on those things I had to work on to really get better. And what I learned from that experience, even more important, is that those little extra things that I did every day, like going back to the high bar, working on that little skill every day, those extra efforts made a big, big difference. We won, and my teammates and I had success in the Olympic Games for lots of reasons, lots of factors that went into that success. But what I think helped me the most was that was that example I received from my father, who he received from his mother and father, who they received from those that we're here to honor, that we're descendants of. And I'm grateful for that. I'm immensely grateful for that. I'm grateful for the experience that I've had, but I'm grateful most importantly for family and for a gospel that allows families to be together forever. Because that's where my greatest joys come. That's where I'm sure your greatest joys comes, from family. And I'm grateful for that. I don't have much time to share more with you, but I thought in the next few minutes, just given the time, maybe I might see if any of you have any questions. I may not have a lot of good family history answers for you, but if we do, we have a few more minutes before we go to the next session. But I'm grateful to be here. I really am, and I look forward to coming back to the next one. So, if we have any questions. Yes. What have we been doing since the Olympics? I've spent a lot of time on the corporate lecture circuit, speaking at corporate events and functions, and that's how kind of I made my living. I spent a lot of my time though as a volunteer. I served off and on the board of directors of USA Gymnastics and the U.S. Olympic Committee. I currently am the chairman of the board of USA Gymnastics. It's a volunteer position, but it takes all my time. And then I serve on the leadership of the International Gymnastics Federation, so I travel quite a bit. So I'm always, my emails to Karen were often from other places in the world as I travel to our gymnastics events and competitions. I've been to every Olympic Games since I've competed. So I've been to 8 summer games, and I've been to 2 winter games, including the Salt Lake Games here. Usually I get to go as a journalist or as, now I'm going as an official. I'm going to be an official on the floor during the gymnastics competition because of my role at the FIG, the International Gymnastics Federation. So, but my wife and I have 5 children. I met my wife. My wife was the captain of the women's gymnastics team at UCLA, where I went to school. And that's the best place to meet short girls, is in the gymnastics room. Those that are looking. And so I met my wife there. We have 5 children. My oldest son Tim is 30. He lives in Southern California, and he's single. My son Christopher is 28. He's single. I don't know why I had to tell you that they were single, but 2 boys. And Christopher actually works. He's an engineer. Works in Provo. Tim went to Hawaii, served a mission in Edmonton, Canada. Christopher served in Paris, France. The poor guy. And he's an engineer. Works for a company in Provo. My son Stephen is 26. He also works. For those of you that ride motorcycles, 2 of my boys work at Fox Racing. you know, the gear, the helmets, yeah, it's a cool job. It's, you know, they both those boys went to BYU Hawaii, and they interned at Quicksilver and both of the surf brands, and Fox was kind of tied into that action sports industry, and that's where they work. And I want to come back next slide with one of my kids, but Stephen is married to another young girl at school, and those boys did sports. They did, two of them wrestled quite a bit and did real well. And then my daughter Catherine was just married about a year ago. Now my joke about height, my daughter is 5'1". She's the one that ran, she ran the 5,000 and 10,000 and ran cross country at BYU. She's the assistant coach there now, while her husband finishes school. Her husband's 6'2", his last name is Tall. So my 5'1" daughter's name is Catherine Tall. She had to get married to be tall, but it worked. And then my daughter Emily is a senior at BYU, she's on the gymnastics team, and she competes there. So she competes for the world. So there's a gymnast in the family, yeah. So it's fun, and my wife loves it. My wife loves the sport, and to have a daughter doing it has been really fun for us. So we got one more year of gymnastics. So that's our family, and it didn't mean to give you that whole genealogy. Any film of me on the high bar falling off, you can find that on YouTube. Yeah. The very first thing that when YouTube first came out, when I just heard about it, I thought, I wonder if I'm on YouTube. And I put my name in there, and there was one video. And it was of that crash I told you about at the Olympics, at the World Championships. I thought of all the things they showed, that's the one they showed. Oh well. No respect. Well, I appreciate the time spent with you. I look forward to chatting with you afterwards. I hope you have a wonderful day. And what a privilege it is for me to be a Red. Thank you very much. And